Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's program. It's titled My Earliest Childhood Memories from Abraham Lincoln Birthplace National Historic Park. And it is part of the Presidential Primary Sources Project. So the Presidential Primary Sources Project is a partnership between Internet 2, the National Archives, and the National Park Service. And it is a free educational program we put on from January through April. And this is just a reminder that by participating in the webinar, you agree to be recorded, streamed, broadcasted, and archived as part of the program series. We do have copies of all of our presentations on our YouTube channel, so you can go there to find all of our programs from the years. And we're so excited to have you all here today. We want you to participate as much as possible. So we're going to use the chat box today. And just a reminder with the chat box, we would like everything to be on topic to what the presenters are talking about. And please participate as much as possible and respond to any of the questions the presenters have. And any questions that you have, you can drop in the chat as well. Also, if you would like to rename yourself so that it reflects your name, so we're calling you something you'd like to be called, that's highly recommended. And if you need help with that, you can drop that in the chat and I can help you with that. And then also, if you would like to be a panelist so we can see you and kind of wave to you, you can do that as well. We can promote you to a panelist and you can just drop that in the chat as well. Thanks again so much for joining us today. We're really excited to get started. And here's our website so you can find future programs and learn more about the program. And with that, I'll turn it over to our wonderful presenters.
Hi, everybody. So we're here at the Abraham Lincoln Birthplace National Historical Park, one of your national park sites. I'm Ranger Noel, and I'm here.
I'm Ranger Stacy. It's nice to see everybody.
And we're going to be talking to you today about some of Lincoln's earliest childhood memories. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you all can see with me. All right, so this is a photograph taken from the National Park. We are currently in Abraham Lincoln Birthplace National Historical Park, and it is a picture of the Memorial Building, which we know formally as the first Lincoln Memorial. And we're talking a little bit more about that, as well as some other features of the park once we get started.
Yes, and I would like to point out, as Noelle said, it is the first national monument that surprises a lot of people. This monument here in our park actually predates the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. by about 11 years. So fun fact of the day.
I want to go ahead and let our teachers know that at the end of this program, there is going to be an activity in which you will take part in. And for that, you are going to need paper and you're going to need markers, crayons, or any kind of writing utensil really would work. But
Pencil,
it's better if you have markers or crayons because then you can have two different colors, which works a little bit better. But really all you need is paper and something to write with. Here we have a map of a portion of the United States. And as you can see, Abraham Lincoln Birthplace National Historical Park is located in Kentucky. So right in the middle of that map, you can see the black arrow pointing to the location of our park. We're in a very rural area in a town called Hodgenville. And it was here at the farm we know as the Sinking Spring Farm that the 16th President Abraham Lincoln was born. Yes. And this photograph is showing a map of the Sinking Spring Farm. And you can see there the memorial building, a visitor center with lots of artifacts on display in the visitor center, lots of trails to hike, as well as you can see on the map mark the site of the Boundary Oak and the location of the Sinking Spring,
which we're all going to be talking about today. So.
And this early photograph shows the Sinking Spring Farm before it was a national park, but not quite Lincoln's time. However, this is what it could have perhaps looked like around the time that Lincoln was living here. So rural farmland, and you can see in this picture lots of crops being grown. And we'll have some other photos of the Sinking Spring Farm throughout today as well.
And all these historic images come from the Parks collection, which is really kind of cool.
And you can view all of these images as well, and many, many more on the park website. And we'll have our email a little bit later. So if you'd like to email us and ask for more pictures, we can direct you on how to do so.
Yes. This next photograph shows Thomas Lincoln, who is the father of our 16th president, Abraham Lincoln. And as I always like to remind our visitors and students when they're looking at this photograph of Thomas, this is not how he would have looked like when they lived here at Sinking Spring Farm. He was about 32 years old when the family lived here. So he was much older in the photograph that you see here. This was actually taken toward the end of his life. So late 50s, early 60s is when we think around the time that this photograph was taken. And Thomas had a very unique upbringing himself. His father, also known Abraham, actually came to Kentucky through the Cumberland Gap as a frontier person. So he came through and settled Kentucky with the likes of people like Daniel Boone. And they settled in Kentucky near Springfield, Kentucky. And it was one day when Thomas was a very young boy, his father was actually killed. The older Abraham, Abraham the Elder, was killed by a band of raiding Native Americans. So as a second son, not the firstborn, Thomas did not inherit anything from his father when his father was killed. It all went to his eldest brother, Mordecai. So Thomas kind of had to make his own way in the world, as it were. So he picked up a lot of skills and trades. He did like to farm. I think he was a farmer at heart. That's what he really made him the happiest, it seemed. And he was also a pretty skilled woodworker. So if you actually come to our park today at the Birthplace Visitor Center, you will see a table that was constructed by Thomas Lincoln on display in our visitor center. So that's a really cool connection we have with him. But Thomas also did, in near Springfield, Kentucky, meet a young lady by the name of Nancy Hanks. Now, this is actually a painting or an artist's conception of what we think maybe Nancy looked like based on descriptions of people who knew her of her time. So the artist would have taken descriptions from different people, even thrown in some, you can see by looking at her face, some characteristics of Abraham Lincoln, and came up with this painting. Unfortunately, we don't have a photo of Nancy, so we're not 100% sure what she looked like. But Nancy was a person, people talk about her as being a kind and gentle woman. She was a pretty well-known person that could spin wool and make cloth from wool. And she also loved her kids. I mean, we know that she would have instilled the love of reading in Abraham that he had his entire life. But Nancy was probably one of the driving forces about him and his love of education.
Yeah, and just to plug here, we do have some educational content and video about Nancy Lincoln on our website that you can definitely check out later if you'd like to learn more about the mother of Abraham Lincoln.
Absolutely. And then this is a photo of the Boundary Oak cross section from the trunk that is currently in our museum here at the Birthplace Visitor Center. So if any of you are able to visit us here at the park, Ranger Noel and I, you will see this in our museum. And it's a cross section of the trunk. And if you look really closely, you can see the rings inside the trunk, which Noel is going to be talking about later. If you look at the bottom, you're going to see some text and some dates, basically some important dates that this tree would have seen during its lifetime. This was called the Boundary Oak Tree because it set on the boundary and marked one of the boundary markers of the Sinking Spring Farm. And a lot of people surmise it was about 25 to 30 years old when Abraham Lincoln was born. It lived until 1976, and it was between 190 and 200 years old at its demise. You know, trees are living things like people. So they come to the end of their natural life, and that's what happened, unfortunately, to this tree. Big, beautiful white oak tree, but then eventually it had been struck by lightning one too many times. Bugs had started eating on it. It had gotten some diseases. So it weakened the tree to the point where the park had to take it down in the mid-1980s. So we have this cross section as a reminder of this, grand marker of the boundary of the Sinking Spring Farm, where it stood for many, many years, but also as a testament of a witness tree. A witness tree is something that is our tree that's alive during a time or a place of a historic event. And in this case, it would have witnessed the birth of Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president.
But there were many, many trees in this area, and many of them would have witnessed a number of historic events, both here at the birthplace on the Sinking Spring Farm and at the Knob Creek Farm, where he would have moved to when he was just 2 years old.
Correct.
So there are many, many trees here. We do often refer to this one specific tree, but there are many witness trees here in the park and throughout the country who witnessed numerous historical events.
Absolutely.
And this photograph, of course, is another early photograph of the Sinking Spring Farm.
This is a photograph of the symbolic birth cabin of Abraham Lincoln. So if you come to the park today, you're going to see the memorial building, which was the first slide that Noelle and I showed you. Inside the memorial building is this cabin, the symbolic cabin. We call it the symbolic birth cabin because it is that. It's a symbol of the place where Abraham Lincoln was born. Unfortunately, we don't know what happened to the original Lincoln family cabin that sat here on Sinking Spring Farm. It could have been hit by lightning. It could have burnt down.
Moved to another
It
farm.
could have been moved to. If I was a frontier farmer,
I would buy the old cabin from you for sure.
Absolutely.
I'd be like making my home in there.
You know, because that's less work you'd have to do. So it's very possible that it was taken apart and then moved to another location and put back together. We just simply don't know what happened to it. But we do know that this cabin pictured here that sits inside a memorial building dates from the 1840s. That's important because it is historic. It's very similar to how we believe the Lincoln family would have lived in the cabin that they built here in the Sinking Spring Farm.
So we have a question for all of you. If you were going to be living in a frontier cabin, what would you need to survive? What would you bring with you if you were moving to the Kentucky frontier?
I bring my cat.
You bring your cat, Stacey?
Yeah, me and my cat go everywhere.
You know, that would actually be very beneficial because it could catch mice. Mice can get you sick. Mice would eat your food. You could catch diseases.
Yes,
that cat would actually be very
a good
beneficial.
catcher. She'd probably play with them before she killed them. What would you bring?
I think I'd bring maybe some like containers.
Like to store stuff in?
Yeah, to store stuff in, like food products.
All the dead mice.
Oh no. I think, because you need like some stirty containers to like prevent rodents from getting into your food.
With
some
baskets.
Cupboards. Yeah. Really, I'd like to make pickles. I think I would.
Oh,
I wouldn't do well without pickles, so hopefully.
Pickles. No, I love
some apple cider vinegar.
Yeah. So drop in the chat your answer to this question. We would love to hear what you would have to say, what you think you would bring on. One thing I always tell people when we do this activity with visitors or with school kids, you have to consider weight. If you're only bringing one wagon, you can only put so much weight in that one wagon. So you have to consider things like that if you're moving to the
Good thing cats are lightweight, so you'll be very.
And my cat's small,
so go ahead and drop in the chat, and can our lovely moderators shout out some of the answers.
Casey, do we have any answers?
Yeah, we've got 2 so far. So one person said family and our animals.
See,
I would bring you, Stacey.
Oh, thank you, Noelle. I'd bring you too, along with my cat. You gotta have friends, right?
And then we also have a fly swatter.
Oh, I have not heard that answer. That's
a very good answer.
That's really good. That's very clever. Okay. Anything else?
Those are the only 2 I see.
Okay. I like the fly swatter.
That's very handy.
Very handy.
I
like how you think. Earlier today, when we did our first broadcast, some other folks said things like a fishing pole,
first aid kit.
That was very popular. A toilet, books, what else do you remember? Seeds for the garden,
and an axe.
And an axe.
Bring an axe. So
yeah, so all very good. There's no wrong answers to this question, in all honesty,
because you need a whole lot of stuff.
You do,
because you're completely dependent on the stuff you have and yourself to survive.
Yeah, the Lincoln family were known as sustenance farmers, which basically means they had to grow or gather or kill basically everything they needed to survive. They didn't have Walmart like we do.
So whenever I was thinking about what I would like to bring to my cabin, I also was thinking about where would I want to put my cabin. And I decided that I would like to be like the Lincolns, and I would want to put my cabin near a water source.
Very smart.
Because you're going to need water not only to drink, but you're going to need to water your plants, your animals, and also people would often store food under running water or near areas of water because it would keep it cooler.
Refrigeration in those days.
So this is a photograph of the Sinking Spring, which is of course how the Sinking Spring Farm got its name. And we believe that the Lincoln cabin would have been placed in close proximity to this natural water source. So it's very likely that Lincoln got his first drink of water from this sinking spring, which we call a karst window, as it is an opening into that underground network of water. We have a diagram here showing you what a karst system of Kentucky might look like. So what the ground underneath the sinking spring farm is. And on top of the surface, there's often like this orangish colored rock, and it's sandstone. And that sandstone acts like a lid to keep the water and the rainwater from going underground. But in places that have small cracks in that sandstone cap rock, the rainwater, after it runs through the grass and the trees and all that greenery and picks up that carbonic acid, it then is going to trickle down through those small cracks in the sandstone, and it's going to land on limestone, which is a gray colored rock, which is what the ground underneath the sandstone here in Kentucky is made out of.
Which is very porous, which allows the water.
It's made out of the same kind of things. Think of it like the carbonic acid being soda and the limestone being your teeth.
Okay.
So that's going to dissolve away holes in that limestone, and that's how caves in Kentucky are made. But it's also how things like the sinking spring are able to have these disappearing streams that seem to vanish underground, or springs which appear out of nowhere.
Like the spring you see here to the right.
Yeah.
Houses like appearing out of the side of the hill.
And while the Lincoln family may not have known exactly how caves were formed, it was very important to not only the Lincoln family, but all of these frontier families and anyone who's lived in Kentucky, even today. You really, if you're not getting your water from a water distribution like we do in the modern day, you really have to live near that water source, or your farm is not going to be successful.
Absolutely.
Even farming today, it's really important to be near a water source so you can access your water.
Very much so. And it's important to note too, people often ask Ranger Noel and I, why did the Lincoln Farm Association put the memorial building where they did on the hill above the sinking spring? And sinking spring is actually part of a floodplain. So more than likely the Lincolns, they were very smart. They knew where they should and should not build their cabin. So the more than likely they would have built their cabin at the top of the hill above the spring, so that way their cabin wouldn't flood.
Even today, when it rains a lot in the park, the area around the sinking spring has standing water.
Absolutely.
Very soggy. Yes. So you wouldn't want your cabin to flood. So that's where the memorial building location was chosen. Yes. And I'm glad it's there because it doesn't flood up in that area.
That's right. That would be bad.
So some local fourth graders have made for us a couple of videos to help show kids like you all about Abraham Lincoln and his life by acting out the different characters. So we're going to start off with an interview with a couple of students playing as Abraham Lincoln,
and talking about
and his family, talking about life here on the Kentucky frontier.
Abraham Lincoln, we are here in beautiful Hodgeville, Kentucky, your birthplace. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like living here during your childhood? I was born in a single-room cabin with a dirt floor. I was raised on a farm with my mom, aunt, and sister. When I was about 2 years old, our family moved down the road to a farm in Knob Creek. I have so many fond memories from that time. It was there that I developed a love for books and reading. I loved to listen to my mother read from the family Bible. That was when also my sister, Sarah, and I began to attend school for the first time. Once while I was playing near a creek, I was playing with some friends, and the current started to take me away. Luckily, my friend and neighbor also got her to save me. One day, Abe and I were playing near a creek. We tried to cross a nearby log to get to the other side, but before I knew what happened, he fell into the river. He began to struggle. Luckily, I was able to grab a nearby stick. He grabbed it, and I saved his life. He nearly drowned. Thomas and Nancy Lincoln, you were the proud parents of Abraham. Can you tell us a little bit about your family and what it was like for Abraham growing up? When I was young, I helped on my family farm. And as I got older, I continued that work ethic by owning a farm with my own family. Farm chores build character. And Abe, working on the farm, helped shape him into the man he turned out to be. He learned the responsibility at a young age that hard work pays off. I taught my son how to read and the importance of an education. My husband didn't share my sentiments. He thought the boys should just work on the farm and take care of the animals. Sadly and tragically, Nancy passed away of milk sickness on October 5th, 1818. Abraham was only 9 years old. Sarah, what was it like being Abe's sister?
Growing up, he was smart and read books a lot. He always wanted to go to school, but didn't get to until he was 6 years old. We didn't get to go to school that often, but loved it whenever we were given the opportunity. I love my brother, and I have always been very protective of him.
Traveling from my hometown in Hardin County, which today is Louisville County, I went from a log cabin to Indiana to Illinois, where I ran to Congress and eventually became the President of the United States.
Well, that's all for the Abraham Lincoln childhood story. Have a nice day, and we hope to see you again. Make sure you visit any of the Abraham Lincoln birthplace memorials. And as they say, the rest is history. Abraham.
I wanted to do a big shout out to some of our local fourth graders. They're the ones that created those videos, and they really got into it, as you can see, and they really enjoyed, being Abraham or the family members, and it was so awesome to see their work. So big thank you to our fourth graders who were our Shaping Lincoln students last year. This is a photograph of the cabin out at Knob Creek Farm. Now we know, of course, Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president, was born here at the Sinking Spring Farm on February 12th, 1809, and they lived here until he was 2 years old. At the age of 2, Thomas Lincoln, who had paid money for the Sinking Spring Farm, actually entered a land dispute battle with at least 3 other people. Unfortunately, anyone who wanted to survey in those days on the Kentucky frontier could. So if I wanted to go survey, I would go out and I'd survey a piece of property, and usually I'd pick landmarks like the boundary oak tree or the sinking spring.
Or a big rock.
Or a big rock, and I would draw lines on a map. Then Ranger Noel, who wanted to be a surveyor would
I'm
come.
about the big rock, Stacy. So I'm going to say every big rock.
She's going to go and just use the big rocks. So because of that, you had overlapping boundaries, and that's what happened to Thomas Lincoln. More than one person claimed this farm, which unfortunately he fought in the court. He followed the legal process, but unfortunately he lost that court case. In the meantime, he decided to move his family 10 miles away to the Knob Creek Farm. Now, they didn't own this land. They leased it, but they did farm here. And this is the spot where Abraham lived from 2 years old till he was 7. So for the next 5 years. And he does have distinct memories of this place. He said himself, my first recollection is of the Knob Creek place. And this is a photograph showing Knob Creek itself. Now, you heard on the video Austin talking about saving Lincoln from the creek. Most days, the creek is going to look like what you see here. It's going to be very quiet, very gentle little babbling creek. On days when it rains really hard, Noel and I have seen it, it can be 5 or 6 feet deep and just swift moving, almost like rapids of moving water. So when it's like that, you can easily see how somebody could topple in.
Very dangerous.
Yeah, very dangerous and get swept away. But this creek, of course, is still here. You can still see it if you come out to Knob Creek and visit the park today. This is an artist's rendering of young Abraham looking outside that cabin door out at Knob Creek, looking out at the road, or what they called the turnpike in those days. And this is important because basically they lived along a main highway. Really, Abraham would have seen all manner of individuals passing up and down this road. He would have seen, folks who were traveling, folks who were, visiting people and traveling up and down the road. He would have seen soldiers returning from the War of 1812. He would have seen enslaved individuals, probably in chains, being marched down this road, being taken to deep South slave markets to be sold into the deep South. So I'm sure all of this had a really profound impact on him. And he got to meet a pretty wide cross section of people by living by this road.
And remember too, living on a highway today, these cars are zipping by, but a lot of these people they have wagons, but their wagons are full of stuff.
Right.
So they're walking.
Right.
So
traveling at a much slower pace.
Absolutely. So he would have gotten to see a lot of people, whereas today living by a highway,
right,
have a different experience. But he would have interacted with a large number of.
And I think this might be one of the things that can contribute to probably his open mind, is that he, at a very young age, got exposed to a lot of different, kind of like a cross section of the population. So here's another one of our Shaping Lincoln videos.
This one's all about Lincoln living on the turnpike and some of the things he may have seen and how that influenced him in his life.
Hello, today we are going to talk about Abraham Lincoln and all he went through during slavery as a child, and why Abraham Lincoln is such an important person in history. Mr. Lincoln, tell us what happened with slavery during your early years.
I grew up in a small farm area in Kentucky. I watched enslaved African Americans being transported south on the Louisville National Turnpike near my family cabin. This left an imprint on me. I couldn't stand watching them suffer. As president, I worked really hard to free slaves. This was a hard task, but I knew something that had to be done. All people who created equally and needed to be treated as such. Those who deny freedom for others deserve it, not themselves.
Slaves were used for doing work for the white people. The southern states treated African Americans as property. They were used to help harvest crops, work on farms, and even do housework. When Abraham Lincoln became president, he was very passionate about rights of all people. In 1863, he freed the slaves. This had a huge impact on the future of the United States.
Thomas, the father of Abraham Lincoln. Can you shed some light on events that helped influence Abraham?
One thing that comes to mind was impactful on my family, how hard we had in the beginning. We were a humble family who were able to purchase a nearby farm. But Abe learned at an early age that hard work pays off. I think that helped him have compassion for the slaves. He knew the value of an honest day's work. I knew it shouldn't be forced on others. We also raised Abe in a Christian home. My wife Nancy would read from the family Bible each night. Abe attended church services that helped him to influence to love his neighbor. Abraham Lincoln wanted to free the slaves because he thought it was unjust. Lincoln said, "I believe the Bible is the best gift God has ever given to man. All the good from the Savior of the world is communicated to us through this book."
Hey, what are some of the problems you faced during the presidency?
Well, I faced many problems while being president, including the Civil War. I had to manage the war policy as well as the military and make decisions about such major issues as slavery, possible succession, and reconstruction of the nation.
Lincoln continued to maintain that he would not interfere with slavery where it existed. However, as a result of Union battlefield losses, by July 1862, the president had decided that emancipation was a military necessity. Lincoln knew that many thousands of enslaved people were ready to fight for the Union.
In 1863, he freed the slaves. This had a huge impact on the future of the United States.
Hello.
Okay, so if you come to our Knob Creek Tavern Visitor Center today, you can see some of the things that are shaping Lincoln kids we're talking about in this video. One of the panels we show up here in the top left picture talks about the church and the impact that religion had, and also anti-slavery teachings and beliefs had on young Abraham. We know that Thomas and Sarah, his parents, were both, Thomas and Nancy, his sister, Sarah, but their parents were anti-slavery in their teachings at home for Abraham and Sarah. And they also attended an anti-slavery Baptist church while living at Knob Creek. So Abraham would have heard these teachings on a fairly regular basis. We also have a photograph on the bottom right showing a reproduction of what shackles would have looked like that more than likely the enslaved would have been wearing as they were walking down the turnpike there right in front of the cabin at Knob Creek. So some pretty powerful things if you think about it, and kind of how all these little seeds are planted here in Kentucky that would bear fruit later on in Lincoln's life when he became president. Lincoln said one time, "I'm naturally anti-slavery. If slavery is not wrong, then nothing is wrong. I cannot remember a time when I did not so think and feel."
Yeah, and through quotes like that Lincoln said in his later years, you can really see how these early childhood memories influenced not only his early childhood, but his entire life.
Really had an impact on him. It's something that he never forgot.
And, that time he spent here in Kentucky changed the way he would behave as an adult. Absolutely. And that lasting impact he would have.
This is an artist's rendering or painting of the family gathered around the grave of TL. Not many people know or realize Lincoln actually had a baby brother. And this baby brother was born at the Knob Creek farm. And the record of history tells us that he was an infant when he died. Now, they define an infant as being anyone from just, a few moments old up to a year old. So we're not exactly sure how long baby Lincoln lived, but we do know he was born and he passed away while the family was at Knob Creek. Because they did not own that land, they had to ask a neighboring family if they could bury the baby in their burying ground. So this is what this painting is depicting. You see Thomas holding the stone marked TL, and we think because Abraham was named after his grandfather, the baby with the TL might have been named Thomas after his father. We don't know that 100% for sure. That's just what we kind of surmise. And then you see Nancy with the handkerchief up next to her face, and then Sarah, the big sister, with her arm around young Abraham here in this photo. So this theme of loss that you see kind of throughout Abraham Lincoln's life, of course, culminating, of course, in the Civil War, and of course, ultimately his loss of life at the end of the Civil War. You see that theme starting here in Kentucky with the loss of his baby brother and the sadness he must have felt. Because as I remind visitors, when the family moved on to Indiana, they could not take the baby's remains with them. So he stayed here. This is the original TL headstone. It was just a fieldstone, a rock, basically, that more than likely Thomas would have inscribed the initials on. We think Thomas did this because from some of the existing pieces of furniture that we know are attributed to Thomas Lincoln, has these same initials, TL, for him marked in them. So if you come see us at the park today, Ranger Noel and I, you'll be able to see this stone in our visitor center.
We also have a reproduction of this stone that you can
Yes.
actually touch.
And feel and pick it up and, you know, run your finger over the inscription. So it's really cool to see.
So we wanted to ask you all, and thinking about what Abraham Lincoln had said before, my earliest recollection is of the Knob Creek place. We wanted to know, what is one of your first memories? So if you could drop those in the chat.
Yeah. And Casey, if you could help us out with those.
Yeah, for sure.
So what's one of your earliest memories of a national park or your being
I want
a
to say
kid?
one of my earliest memories of a national park was getting to go on a cave tour at Mammoth Cave National Park.
Which
which
isn't
was-
that far away.
No, it isn't that far away. So that was very exciting. Get to go into a cave, which,
Mhm.
you know, has inspired my love of Kentucky and the karst system and
And you
Sinking
worked
Spring.
at the cave.
I did used to work
as the
there.
As park ranger. So.
I do like talking about caves, but I do enjoy being on the surface most days. So here at the Abraham Lincoln Birthplace, you get the best of both because you could talk about caves and karst, the beautiful sinking spring, the disappearing streams here, and you get to see the sunshine.
To be outside.
Yeah, and be outside.
Yeah.
What about you, Stacy? What's one of your first memories of a national park?
I don't know if it's a first memory. It's maybe a memory later in life, but when the summer I was learning to drive, the summer I turned 16 or 15, I can't remember. My parents taught me how to drive on battlefield roads because my family are all history geeks. So growing up, I would go to they'd take me to battlefields, you know, and I grew up going to like places like Gettysburg and Manassas and Antietam and so I knew the road system. So the summer I was learning to drive, that's how they taught me how to drive, was along the battlefield roads. And they said I couldn't get hurt very easily going 25 miles an hour.
Do we have any in the chat that people would like to share? Okay,
We have from William and Isaac, we have Fort Henry and the Cannons.
Very cool. That's something I always liked to see. Was the cannons. Yeah. Was that Fort McHenry, did you say?
Fort Henry.
Fort Henry. Okay. Very cool. Anything else?
Yeah, we have from Our Lady of Ghost Mountain, getting burnt by a campsite marshmallow.
Sometimes it's worth the risk for those marshmallows.
Yeah, I bet you guys are making s'mores. Yeah.
Worth the risk.
Totally worth the risk. Yep.
So if you have any other early memories, feel free to go ahead and be thinking about those and drop those in the chat. And while you're thinking about it, we do have another video about children acting out some other early memories of Abraham Lincoln's life.
Thomas and Nancy Lincoln purchased the Sinking Spring farm in 1808 for $200. The Lincolns and their daughter Sarah moved to the farm from Elizabethtown, Kentucky. Abraham was born not long after they moved. After living at the Sinking Springs farm for a short time, Thomas Lincoln was confronted with a dispute over the ownership of the farm. In 1811, Thomas moved his family down the road to the Knob Creek farm, which they rented while waiting for the court battle to be settled.
Good afternoon, Tom. How are you doing? I'm doing pretty good today. I'm just trying to get this wood ready to put some more fence. Tom, I hate to be very bad news, but I stopped by to give you this paper. What's this? Tom, this is an eviction notice. There are more land disputes going on with the Knob Creek farm of people claiming to be the landowners. What am I going to do? I know things didn't go well with the land suit over Sinking Spring. I heard their courts ruled against you and you lost that farm too. I really hate to do this to you, but I have no other option with all the land disputes over the Knob Creek farm. I wish there were better laws to help here in Kentucky to define the land boundaries and titles. Me too. Just keeps happening to us here. Nancy, Philip stopped by and dropped off this.
Oh, Tom, why do we have to leave? It seems there's another land dispute going on about the Knob Creek Farm. It's just like what happened with the Sinking Spring Farm. This is terrible. We have such bad luck owning land here. I wish the laws for owning land in Kentucky were better. Yeah, I think when we move, we need to go to Indiana where there are better laws to protect landowners. And I even heard that we can buy land from the government. Then we won't end up in this mess again. How will we tell the kids that we have to move again? I'm not sure, but maybe we could tow them together this evening. There isn't any way around this. Kids, your mother and I would like to talk to you. Coming. Kids, we have a little bit of bad news for you. What is it, Mother? Sarah, Abraham, we have to leave Knob Creek. Why? I like it here. We've only been here for a few years. We have the woods in the creek that I get to hunt and fish at. I have friends here. Son, I understand, but there's another land dispute going on about the Knob Creek Farm, and we can't go back to the Sinking Spring Farm because we lost the court battle. The owners say we have to go. Kids, we'll be leaving in a few weeks because it'll take us a while to pack and get the wagon ready. I'm sure you can still see your friends before we leave. And I'm sure you'll make new friends where we move to. Where are we moving? We'll be moving to Indiana where there are better laws to protect our land. Can I go fishing with Austin tomorrow so I can tell him we have to leave? Sure, Simon. I think I got a fish. I haven't even gotten a bite yet. I am sure going to miss this creek. What do you mean, miss this creek? Austin, I have to tell you something. What is it? We're going to have to leave in a few weeks to Indiana. People are claiming to be the landowners of our farm, and we can't go back to the Sinking Spring Farm because Papa lost the court battle. Can't they just buy new land here? Papa said he wants to go to Indiana because they have better laws to help protect our land boundaries and titles. Well, I'll be find a place that has a creek so you can go fishing like we do here. Me too. Mother, will our new house have wooden floors? I'm not sure, dear, but I'm sure it'll be nice. Will there be a creek nearby so I can go fishing? I don't know. I hope so. Good afternoon, Nancy. I just dropped by to give you some warm biscuits. I'm sure the children will get hungry as you are traveling. That is so kind of you. I'm sure they'll love these, and you have been a wonderful neighbor. We will surely miss you. Well, I won't keep you, dear. I know you have packing to do where you can get an early start in the morning. Safe travels to you all. Thank you so kindly. Make sure to give your family our regards. The Lincoln family moved to Perry County, Indiana, in December 1816. Thomas Lincoln purchased land from the government to establish their new home. Abraham Lincoln grew up and held many different jobs. One of his early jobs was being a land surveyor. Could the difficulties his family faced with land disputes in Kentucky have contributed to him doing this job? Tom?
Okay. So this map here shows kind of the track that Lincoln took and the Lincoln family took when they left Hodgenville, as you heard in the video by our students. They moved to Spitzer County, Indiana, and then eventually Lincoln is going to move on to Illinois, and he'll end up in Springfield, which is where he's going to practice law, have a home of his own, have children, and this is where they'll be living right when he wins his first election as president and leave there to Washington, D.C.
So we wanted to ask you all, and drop your answers in the chat. Have you ever moved, and how do you think Lincoln felt when he moved? Have you ever moved, Stacy?
Yes, I've moved several times thanks to working for the Park Service. So every time I've changed parks, I've got a chance to move. So I've lived in several different states. How about you?
I have as well. I've lived in, I think, 4 different states,
cool.
4 or 5 different states, and worked at a bunch of different national parks.
Nice.
And
And Ranger Noel's just getting ready to move again.
I know, but I'm only moving down the road this time.
Yeah.
But even moving down the road, moving can be really scary.
It can be. It can be scary and exciting at the same time because it's kind of the unknown, but you get to live in a new place.
And every time I've ever moved, I've always been very happy once I got there,
Yes.
even if it was a little scary before you go.
Absolutely.
Do we have any answers in the chat?
Yeah, we have one person who says, I've gone on vacation, which is kind of like moving.
Oh, yeah. I feel this because my friends.
That's what they kind of thought they were doing at Knob Creek. You
Yeah.
know, they thought they would be moving back.
They thought
and
they'd
they
be
won the
moving
land
back.
dispute.
Yeah. And I feel this. My friends tell me that I pack like I'm moving when I go on vacation. So
You kind of pack like you're moving when you come into work every day.
it's true. It's very true. I take my whole life with me. So I bet Lincoln he probably felt a little apprehensive. He might have felt a little sad because, like I said, the baby brother's remains had to remain behind.
And he
in
was leaving his
Kentucky.
best friend Austin.
And Austin, he was leaving behind, and maybe even some other friends that he had. So I'm sure he felt apprehensive, but I'm sure he probably felt kind of excited when they got to the new place in Indiana. Awesome.
So we're back at the photo we showed you earlier to talk again about trees and all the things they might have witnessed. So this tree, of course, when it was around 30 years old, it would have been at the Sinking Spring Farm when Abraham Lincoln was born, and also witnessed this place becoming a national park. And it's still, as like on display in the visitor center, is able to see us all every single day as we all come and visit the park. So I want you all to imagine what the inside of a tree looks like. And I have a better photo of one here. It's a cross section, or as they're often called, tree cookies, which are slices of trees. Every ring you see is 1 year of a tree's life. So a tree that is 100 years old would have 100 rings. If you were a tree and you were 7 years old, you would have 7 rings in your tree. So each of these rings can reflect good years with lots of growth, bad years with not so much growth. And we can see a lot about the tree and what it went through in its life, which can help us understand historic events a little bit better.
Absolutely.
So we're going to go into our activity now. And for this activity, you are going to need paper. You're also going to need markers or crayons or some sort of writing utensil. Markers and crayons are best because you really need 2 colors. But if all you have is a pencil, that will work just fine as well. So make sure you're grabbing that. And while you're grabbing those, I wanted to go ahead and say thank you for tuning in. And this is our email where you can reach Ranger Stacy and I. So if you would like to email us to ask for more pictures, find out how you can watch the rest of the Shaping Lincoln videos, or just ask us anything you couldn't think of today, this is the email you'll need to reach out to in order to contact us. So we're back over here and stop sharing our screen.
Yep. And Ranger Noelle is actually going to do this activity with you. And she's getting her piece of paper ready. And I have her writing utensil here, which is a Sharpie in her instance.
So to start, I want you to imagine yourself as a tree. So the center of a tree is its first year of life. So I want you to make a dot in the center of your paper. That is when you were born. So go ahead and make a dot for the year you were born. And then I want you to draw a circle around that dot for every year you are old. And adults, if you're taking part in this activity, you can count by 2s or 5s or even 10s. And I want you to draw around the circle however many years old you are. So if you're 7, you would draw 7 rings. Once you have your rings drawn for every year you are old, I want you to think of some events that took place in your life that correspond with each of those years. So when the boundary oak tree was around 30 years old, it would have seen the birth of Abraham Lincoln. If you were a tree, what would you have seen when you were every year of your age? So maybe when you were around 2 or 3 years old, you got a new dog. So I'm going to draw an arrow to this. And then label that. I got a new dog. Or maybe you had your first visit to a national park. So I want you to go through and imagine yourself as a tree and label each of the rings with some of the memories that influenced your life and that have impacted you. So while you all are getting a chance to do that, I wanted to go ahead and open up the chat for you all to ask questions to Ranger Stacy and I that you may have so far. Can you help us by calling out some of our questions?
Yeah, it looks like we got a question so far. We got, how old was he when he entered politics?
Lincoln, excuse me, Lincoln was 21 when he entered politics.
It's a very good question.
Yes, it was a very good question. Thank you for that. That come from Our Lady of Ghost Mountain. So thank you very much for that question. He entered politics. I mean, he was kind of a local politician. He was a lawyer. He studied law in Springfield. He was what they called a circuit rider for a time, which meant he he would ride around and hear different court cases in different towns. So Lincoln was kind of always well known, not so much as a politician, but as a speaker. He knew how to tell his story and kind of make people see his opinion or his point of view, I should say.
Do you have any other questions anyone would like to ask, either about the activity and questions about it, and we'll discuss the activity and some of your trees here at the end, or just about Abraham Lincoln or working in a national park,
Being a park ranger.
being a park ranger?
Anything you want to ask?
What's your favorite thing about being a park ranger, Stacy?
Oh gosh, I think my favorite thing about being a park ranger is being able to talk to people from all over the world. We are fortunate in that we're at Abraham Lincoln site, so Lincoln really attracts a lot of people. And you know, even though we live in a small town, I mean, Hodgeville is not a very big town by any stretch of the imagination. We still get people from all over the United States, and we get people from all over the world that visit here on a regular basis. So it's really been very neat to see all people from many different countries and all different walks of life, and I really enjoyed that. What's your favorite?
Can I have two favorites?
Of course you can.
One of my favorite things is how beautiful these national parks are, and getting to be in such a beautiful place every single day. And my other favorite thing would be a lot of the parks I've worked at have been about powerful people's childhood memories and about especially the childhood of presidents or of other powerful leaders. So I like to work at these parks to remind people how important childhood is and what an incredible influence it can have on the rest of your life.
That's very important.
You know, these are people's formative years, and what Lincoln experienced here in Kentucky, even though he moved away when he was only 7, that developed who he'd be for his entire life.
Right. And that's kind of the unique opportunity that we have here, Ranger Noel and I, because we get to take that image of our 16th president and kind of flip it on his head and challenge people to think of him as a baby and then as this little boy. Because not many people, when I say Abraham Lincoln, more than likely you're going to imagine this tall man with a stovepipe hat and a beard, you know, the president who led us through the Civil War. But we get to challenge that and challenge people's perception.
Talk about baby Lincoln.
And talk about baby Lincoln. So are there any other questions that anyone has? Maybe someone would like to share their tree.
Yeah, does anyone want to share their tree? You can go on camera and share, or you could take a picture of it and submit that in the chat if you prefer to do it that way.
And Casey will share that with us. If you do.
Yeah. Just let me know if you want to be promoted to a panelist, and you can turn your camera on. Or you can send me an email of it, or you can put it in the chat here. If you have a photo of it. Oh, we have another question. How did Lincoln's mother's death affect him as a youth, and then as a young man?
It's also a very good question. Wow, you guys have some really good questions today. We do know that Abraham was very much affected by his mother's death. He was really close to his mom, his birth mother, Nancy, who we talked about today. And then we should also mention, after his mom passed away, they were living in Indiana at the time. His father, Thomas, actually came back here to Kentucky. He knew a lady that lived in Elizabethtown, and she was a widow. Her name was Sarah Bush Johnson. And he came back and he asked her to marry him. So he took her and her children up to Indiana. So not only did Lincoln gain a stepmom, he gathered some step siblings, some more brothers and sisters. So we know it affected him. He once said, "Everything I am, I owe to my angel mother." So I like to think he's thinking about both of them, but especially his birth mom. So.
And his stepmother would have had a huge influence on his life as well.
Very much so. She also promoted reading and education, which we know, I say Thomas, his father, and Lincoln, Abraham didn't always get along. Thomas liked to work more with his hands and farming. Abraham liked to work more with his mind and thinking and learning and reading.
And both his mother and his stepmother really promoted that.
Absolutely.
Nurtured that.
And Sarah Bush Johnson, we know, brought books with her, which I'm sure Abraham was thrilled at that when his stepmom showed up and she
had a bunch of books.
Had a books. I mean, owning books at that time was a luxury. So, we know that he would have been greatly affected by both his mom and his stepmom. I see a comment here. Yes, you're right. It was a great president for hating slavery. Yes, that's very true. Is there any other questions, or anyone would like to share their witness tree, the tree ring year's life with us? We do encourage you, if you can, to come see us here at the park. Our Birthplace Visitor Center is
Come
open.
see Stacy and I.
Yeah, that's usually where we are. Ranger Noel and I are located. We're open every day of the year, pretty much, except like Thanksgiving, Christmas, the big holidays. And then the Memorial Building is here and is open every day. And then our Knob Creek Visitor Center, the grounds are open throughout the year, but the Visitor Center is open seasonally. So this time of year, it's open on the weekends. And then in the summer, from like Memorial Day to Labor Day, it's open 5 days a week. And then again on the weekends in the fall. And then in the winter, it's closed. But you can still come and, see the cabin and walk down to the creek. And it's a really cool place to visit. And the park is free, so we don't charge an admission fee.
And it's so neat because you're able to see the place of Lincoln's earliest childhood memories here in person.
And as I've always said, it's the only spot in the world where you could say he was born here. I mean, there's only one of those types of places.
And I think really had one of the greatest influences on his life at Knob Creek.
Without a doubt. Okay.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us
today. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much to Ranger Stacy and Ranger Noel for all of your wonderful presentation and expertise and time. And thank you to everyone who joined and participated today. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day. Thanks again so much for joining.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.